women. And we chose 4 areas to study, which we knew disproportionately, exclusively, or differentially affected women. They are brain health, autoimmune immune, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. The NIH only began to ensure the inclusion of women in all clinical research after an act of Congress in 1993. And it was only 6 years ago, in 2016, that the NIH began requiring studies to use female mice and animal cells in research. These delays have left us with an impoverished evidence base about women's health, and the impact is far-reaching. It means that when it comes to keeping our economy healthy, we are often using analysis and data that doesn't even apply to half the population, the driving force and engines of the global economy. The analysis and the data matters. Women are disproportionately and differentially impacted by some of the costliest diseases we face. We're only 12% of the $2.4 billion 2019 NIH Alzheimer's budget, 7% of the $86 million 2019 rheumatoid arthritis budget, and just 4.5% of the $440 million NIH coronary artery disease budget. We need more research dollars focused on sex and gender differences in diseases where women are disproportionately affected. After all, women are 80% of all autoimmune disease patients in the US and are the majority of autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis patients, a disease which can take you out of the workforce between 35 to 55. And we know heart disease is the #1 killer of women and the leading cause of death in women over age 40, especially after menopause. Over 500,000 women die from heart disease in the US each year, more than all cancers combined. And women are also 50% more likely to die within a year following a heart attack than men. 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women, and while very few people associate menopause with the brain, a new study done by one of our collaborative members at Weill Cornell Medicine found that menopause was the #1 predictor of Alzheimer's changes in women's brains, and that we should start thinking about reducing the potential risks for Alzheimer's disease in female patients at 40 or 50 years old, not at 70. Cardiac disease costs $555 billion to the US economy. Women are 50% more likely to die after their first heart attack. And as I said, 4% of funding focuses on women. Alzheimer's disease costs $305 billion to the US economy. Women are 66% of the patients and 12% of the research funding. And rheumatoid arthritis costs $40 billion a year to the US economy. Women are 60% of the patients and 7% of the funding. But here's some good news. It turns out that women's health research isn't just good science, it's a good investment, and it yields far higher rates of return than general research. So we've just talked through some very powerful returns in big numbers, but what does this data really mean? And how will it change our investment in women's health? Well, it turns out that if we implemented the findings in the WHAM report together, we would invest a little over $300 million and get back over $13 billion to the economy. So let me go back to the beginning and ask, how can we make decisions based on information that excludes 52% of our population, 50% of our workforce, 2/3 of our wealth holders, and nearly all of our spenders? Well, I would say that we can't and we shouldn't as morally ethical individuals. I am very enthusiastic about how all of you can create significant and impactful change through innovation and investment, and hope that some of this data will support all of your efforts. Thank you so much for inviting me to kick off this exciting conference today.
We have assembled leading physicians in women's healthcare to examine the reasons behind and consequences of underemphasizing older women's health. We're joined by Denise Pines, board member of the Federation of State Medical Boards, founder of WisePaws Wellness, a pro-aging health and education platform, co-founder of the FemAging Project, and moderator for our discussion. Her panelists are Dr. Nanette Santoro, professor and E. Stewart Taylor Chair of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the University of Colorado Medical School. She specializes in reproductive and endocrinology. And Rachel Braun-Scherl, a seasoned business executive focused on sexual health and reproductive health. She calls herself a business builder, a marketing strategist, and a vagipreneur. Let's hear what they have to say on the topic.
Hi, Dr. Nanette Santoro and Rachel Bronchero. I am so thrilled to have you both joining us today. So earlier we heard from Carol Lee share research about women's health that's, alarming yet optimistic, because once we know the data, and you both are researchers, so you know this, we have an opportunity to make those changes that we want to see. One piece of data, though, shows that women ages 40 plus are growing. They're socially and economically powerful. And now menopause is not an old woman's thing. The oldest millennial as of this year is now 41 and entering perimenopause stage. So as healthcare experts who provide care and solutions for these women, how have perspectives about management of women's health issues evolved over the last 30 years? I know this is a loaded question, Dr. Santoro, but what have you seen in the last 30 years?
Well, there's been a tremendous amount of knowledge that's been gained. One of the important studies in the United States is the SWAN study, the study of women's health across the nation. So we have followed over 3,000 women at the beginning. Now, these are women at age 45 when they started the study, and we've studied them every year for what's going on now 28 years. So we have a really nice slice of life, looking at where they started, what the symptoms were, how they tolerated their menopause. Where we don't have information and where I think there's a gap, and this is where the millennials come in, is that those earlier stages of the transition are not as well studied. And when does this start for women? How early does it start? It seems to start earlier than the 40s for some. And for some, not a huge portion, but some women, the symptoms are pretty significant. So those are some of the things that I think remain to be understood. But the knowledge has been really fantastic. And I think one of the other great things about the SWAN study is we've learned about women of different race ethnicities. So based on self-description and self-described race ethnicity, we have substantial numbers of African-American women, almost half of SWAN, Hispanic women, and we have a portion of women that were Chinese and Japanese backgrounds.
So Rachel, what have you seen in your lens? What have you seen in the last 30 years or 20 years?
The change has been spectacular on one hand, and the other hand, a little bit slow. But I'll start with the spectacular. First of all, there's many more conversations. There are many more entrepreneurs in this space. There are many more discussions. As Dr. Santoro said, there's more data, and that arsenal of information is being built every single day. There's a greater awareness. To me, this is one of the biggest changes, that for women, women's health, regardless of how you define it, sexual, reproductive health, whatever is the term that you use, that is not a single linear experience. It is something that affects every aspect of her life. Obviously, it affects her physically, it affects her emotionally, it affects her cognitively, it affects her energy level, it affects her ability to care for her family, it affects her economic well-being. So the conversations that have really changed are the ones that say, we get you. You're a complex set of systems, and we can't just look at this one single piece. And one of the areas of data that I find the most enlightening are the companies that are looking at the sort of soft costs that we don't normally think about that relate to menopause or aging or symptoms or fill in the blank, which is what is happening in the workplace. If we are managing or providing services to these people in a more organized, more available fashion, we're reducing turnover. We're reducing the amount of money we have to spend on search to replace them. We're increasing productivity. We're increasing the likelihood that they will come back to work. So when you look at all that, what is totally new is this idea of understanding the toll it takes on people and understanding the value of coming up with better interventions, better solutions, not only the value to the individual, but the value to the family, to the organization, and to society.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That I think once we kind of like recognize this in the workplace, we'll really start to see some changes happening for women. You know,
one of the analogies I give is when I had my first child, and you go back to work, you know, the maternity care was you nursed in a dark janitorial closet on a bucket that was turned over, you know, and now what we see is so many companies have added maternity, fertility, egg freezing, IVF benefits because of the awareness that women of childbearing age are incredibly valuable employees to their organization. We're starting to see that a little bit in menopause, more in the UK than here, but with the same idea that these people have an enormous amount of knowledge. They're probably at their prime value to the company. And are there ways that we can offer program services support that will keep them in the workforce in a way that's good for the company and good for the human?
Yeah, that's perfect. That was going to lead me really into, you know, my next question, just about how do we get, you're right. I think we are starting to do really well, not great, but well in sort of the fertility pregnancy period, you know, for women. But when it comes to, you know, the post childbearing years, even in the health innovation, in research, and in clinical practice perspective, we're not seeing that. I mean, Dr. Santoro, as a leader in research involving the treatment of menopausal symptoms, along with your clinical practice perspective, I mean, what are your thoughts of where do we go for this woman, you know, in her next evolution of where she functions and operates?
I think the UK, I agree with what Rachel said. The UK is leading the way here. I don't think we're going to lead the way in the United States. I'm a little concerned that women with symptoms may be at risk in the workplace more so than they are in a place like the UK, where there is an appreciation that you want to keep these people in the workforce. That's part of the human capital that you must retain if you want to be the best and the most competitive companies. So I do hope that we acquire some of that. I'm kind of looking to what happens there to see what we will do here. But of course, you know, every woman's course through the transition is different. So leaving women to find their own way is maybe not the best way to do this. And putting in some workplace adaptations that women can do may make a very big difference. I think the pandemic may have taught us something that, you know, we otherwise wouldn't know, which is that everybody seems to do a pretty decent job of working from home. So there's one very simple thing you can do for somebody who's having, you know, significant symptoms, maybe doesn't want to be at work sweating all day, you know, maybe spend a little more time with a home program.
Yeah, I totally agree with that perspective. I mean, I think that, yes, in terms of the US, I mean, the UK had a challenge, right? They don't have these large population segments like the way we do. And so they actually needed women who were, you know, in their 50s to still stay in the workplace. And so they were forced to do it. It's not like they were more progressive than us. It was that they were actually having an economic impact across the entire country that we don't face because, you know, we had our boomer population to Gen X. And now we have two huge populations coming to replace those populations, millennials and Gen Z. So we don't actually face the crisis in the same way to have these like immediate responses, this complete, let's embrace this and move on. So we do definitely have our challenge. And with the reversal of Roe v. Wade, we are now back into that childbearing focus for women. And a lot of folks who are in the, you know, sort of, you know, post or late reproductive stage definitely are finding, you know, going to find, you know, a challenge championing this particular issue. So, you know, what do you think of the fact that, you know, 55% of women over the age of 40 still have serious concerns about their ability to age well? I mean, and be independent and be active. Either one of you can jump in here. I mean, that's a startling statistic that they feel this way.
I think there are two things. And I think that for women, the process of menopause itself has become too closely associated with aging. Aging is, of course, always going on in the background, but menopause is superimposed upon that aging curve. And distinguishing what is due to menopause which is something that's a hormonal process that can be treated in a pretty straightforward way by treating those hormonal changes, either with hormones or with alternatives, and with actual issues associated with aging, is a very important thing for a woman to do. So in many ways, I view as a clinician and a physician, the perimenopause is an ideal time for a woman to take stock of her health. Like, maybe these habits I've been doing in my 20s and 30s are not so good for me anymore, and I need to stop them because they're going to lead to disease later in life. Maybe I've got to, step up or maintain the exercise. What do I do about these joint aches and pains? Ways to address all of those other conditions and take better care of oneself is a critical part of healthy aging, really, and that's the goal.
So Rachel, what are your thoughts about this?
So one of the things that is really important that I believe is happening is this idea that women are now starting to talk about it. They're caregivers. Most of them are not like Dr. Santoro, who have been talking about this for a long time, but they're starting to talk about it and put a vocabulary around it. And one of the things that I hear, I do a podcast with a practicing gynecologist, and where we talk to business leaders and try to figure out solutions to unmet needs, is this idea that women come into her office day after day and say, am I going crazy? Because it's a very isolating experience. They're doing it. They don't know anyone else is going through it. They've never had the conversation, or importantly, the vocabulary to do it. So one of the positive things is at least there are companies building community and conversation so people aren't doing this in an isolated fashion. I think it's very hard in reality to separate menopause from aging because of how often they come together. I mean, obviously, every day we're aging. Not every day are we going through perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause. But I think that it's a much bigger issue than that, which is just the whole conversation around aging for women in general, which then gets exacerbated by its simultaneous experience with menopause. So I think we need more language, we need more conversations, we need women not to feel alone. There is tons of information, as Dr. Santoro mentioned. We need to make it more accessible, we need to make it more digestible, and we need to really just continue to have this conversation until it no longer is uncomfortable.
Agree. And one of the most helpful things and what patients kind of ask for is something called anticipatory guidance. What am I looking at?
Mm-hmm.
What does this process going to be like for me? And that's a way that I think a healthcare provider can really be beneficial. In addition to what Rachel's talking about, which is really normalizing this.
Yes.
This happens to everybody. It's normal. I would say that a good third of the patients I see in the office do not leave with a prescription for medication. They leave with the knowledge that what I'm experiencing is something that's actually expected, given my age and my hormones and where I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to try these strategies, and then I'll be back if that doesn't work for other approaches. So I think the normalization is really a critical piece.
I love that, Dr. Santoro. Rachel, so what should individuals or companies who are developing health innovations, what do they need to think about most when developing them, clinically, and, quality of life relevant solutions for women who are 40 plus?
So I think there's a couple different dimensions. And I was just on a call earlier today. You have many different audiences. So if you're trying to sell it to the employer, you have to demonstrate, if they're paying for an incremental benefit, that there is some benefit to the organization, whether it's an absolute dollar savings, dollar improvement, increased revenue, or some of the softer things that I mentioned earlier, like reduction in cost to in employee turnover. There has to be a reason. This just can't be, it's the right thing to do. While that should be good enough, we know that it's not. We know that it's not good enough, and you need to sell to each of your constituents. When you're looking at women as the purchasers, again, there has to be a measurable, meaningful difference in how they feel using your solution versus not using your solution, because they have a lot of things to spend their money on. And this is only one. And you have to give them an easy to understand, digestible reason to invest in this way. So I think one of the things that happens from a women's health sort of, it's nice to do it perspective, is sometimes people aren't spending enough time talking about the economic value of it. What does this solution do? What does it accomplish? What does my organization or my workforce look like without it? And if my organization with it is better on any dimension, economically, culturally, retention, then I get it. Then it's something I'm willing to pay for. And it's the same thing from the patient perspective. This just can't be, this is nice to do, so you should do it. You have to really demonstrate that this is not just a feel-good venture, but there's some true benefit that can be measured.
Dr. Santoro, I mean, what are some insights, as a clinician that you want product developers and innovators to have? What do you see that's currently like now they're missing most when it comes to creating these services for women?
I think, the trends that I see that I would really want to applaud are the types of things that allow women to self-monitor, because many women have learned how to self-regulate. We're sort of inherently multitaskers, where that's our societal role, whether we like it or not. We're usually doing many things at the same time. So keeping an eye on yourself, monitoring that. Some devices that help women monitor the quality of their sleep, they find that very beneficial. So a lot of things that have elements of sort of the cognitive behavioral therapy, which are sort of little toolboxes, ways that there's a number of different hacks you can try for things like weight control, for just dealing with low levels of anxiety that don't require medication, but that are disturbing, that keep a woman up at night. All those things tend to crop up during the menopause transition, and women that have the tools can use them as they need them to beat them back. So those, I think, are the more successful ones. The ones that I would say that go on the other side are, there's also unfortunately many products out there that promise things that really can't be delivered. The message that, if we can arrest your menopause, we can stop aging completely would be nice, but it doesn't really work like that. Right. And there are things out there that do promise that to women. And I think that that's really, and for a variety of reasons, they're not held to proof of claim or efficacy. So those wind up being disappointing and can really waste people's time going down rabbit holes, hoping for things that probably don't work.
Dr. Santoro, Rachel, thank you both for giving us the healthcare point of view to guide innovation for women ages 40 plus. It was invaluable. Thank you both.
Next, women's health investors discuss how their investments are evolving beyond fertility due to the FemAging opportunity. Leading this discussion, Connie Harrell, president of Carrot Sue Forum, Southern California, and serial entrepreneur. She is in conversation with Jolene Anderson, the co-founder and managing director for Vector Point Impact Partners. It's a seed through early growth stage purpose-driven impact venture firm and advisory team. Vector Point's team launched Vector Point Impact Partners LP, VIP, to fund and accelerate emerging companies that are addressing some of the society's most pressing challenges, global health and climate change.
I'd like to welcome everyone today as we share time focused on advancing women's healthcare innovation and investment. The question we have here today is that in this section, as it pertains to investors, is why and what can we do about the fact that so much focus is put on fertility, premenopause, and not so much is focused on women 45 and over. Today, we have a wonderful guest. We have Jolene Anderson, who is going to talk with me a little bit about investing in opportunities for women over 45. She is the co-founder of Vector Point Impact Partners, former founder and pioneer of Global Wellness Spa and Resort. She's been working with medical device companies, life science, consumer wellness, healthy. Her focus has been on aging and wellness. She's an active member of Carrot Sue Forum and the Angel Capital Association, and she serves on many boards that focus on bringing in more investors to invest in opportunities. So there's a significant gap, as I stated before, in funding for parenthood and fertility innovations versus the FemAging tech sector. So Jolene, I know that you are very passionate with your focus on healthy aging and longevity and the kinds of companies we invest in as angels that are addressing the problems all women face in healthy aging and how to become more involved in angel investing in women's healthcare companies. How do you think we can support that in bringing in more angel investors to invest in this sector?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts and passion for wellness, but also how we can encourage more women angel investors in this space. You know, obviously as women, I feel very active, very firmly that we need to be more proactive in terms of managing our investments. In fact, it's very exciting to see that over 70% of the wealth in this country in the next decade, the end of this decade, will be held in the hands of women. So as a woman investor, I think it's only fair that we look at how we can, you know, vote with our dollars. How are we going to change women's healthcare? Well, we're going to change it by investing in companies that are changing women's healthcare. And, you know, as obviously as we get older, health has never been more important, even at a very young age now due to COVID. That's brought the importance of health investment up very close and personal to all of us. But as we age, we are going to be looking at other issues, and we need to study and look at the longevity trends. So the US is the leader in regenerative medicine and longevity and spends an average of $672 billion, followed by China. So how can we focus some of those dollars specifically on women's longevity? And so although women make up half of the adult population, of the nearly $42 billion that's spent annually in this country from NIH, National Institutes of Health, on research, only approximately $5 billion of that $42 billion is directed specifically at women's health. We need to make sure that changes. If we're 50% of the population, you bet we should be getting 50% of those funding into women's health issues and aging. And I feel very, very strongly about that.
And so your involvement so far, you were a past chapter president of Keiretsu Forum. And so what can we do as far as really engaging these women to look at more opportunities and really define the opportunities that are focused on this group?
Well, you know, there are a lot of women-owned, there are a lot of groups targeted to women CEOs or women in the workplace, women in leadership. I think it's incumbent on us to reach out to our circles of influence and encourage women in these circles that are accredited and that wish to become involved, and invite them to learn more about investing as an angel. And, you know, women and mentorship and leadership is forefront in the news now. Diversity is forefront in the news. It's really, really important that women from all sectors that fit within the accreditation of an angel investor are invited to come and learn more about angel investing and see how they can vote with their dollars, invest in women's wellness companies, women's healthcare companies, things that are really going to make change the landscape for not only for us, but for our daughters and our granddaughters. And that is really, really important, because we will be leaving a legacy behind and using our dollars to change the world.
I know you've been an investor for a long time, not only with Keiretsu Forum, but with other organizations as well. Can you tell me what kind of opportunities you look at personally?
Well, I have a number of friends, as well as myself, that have been affected by autoimmune disorders. Mine's not fatal, but, you know, it does put you on the sidelines. And I've always been very interested in how the brain and how the autoimmune system changes based on the brain. So one of the companies that I've been really, really interested in, that I invested in 3 times, is called InMedics. and it was founded by a rheumatologist here in Seattle. And I really liked the fact that they had earlier defined and helped with women with fibromyalgia, and also that rheumatologists work with 90% women, female patients. And so that was very exciting to me, how they're changing the entire scope through immunoautonomics and their bloodless diagnostic. I also looked at companies that are in the oncology space. I'm formerly on the leadership advisory board here in Seattle, Pacific Northwest, for American Cancer Society, and went back to DC to lobby for more funds as a volunteer at what's called Celebration on the Hill for more research dollars for cancer. And, I'm very, very passionate about oncology. Really very excited about some of the consumer wellness companies that I've seen that are women-led and some aren't women-led. There was a company I saw that I didn't invest in, I would love to have, and that they were looking very deeply, it was Seattle-based, at cellular senescence. And that was a new term that I'd not been familiar with, but cellular senescence is really looking at rejuvenation research. And it's a new field, but it's very, very exciting because it's growing very rapidly.
Well, that's very exciting to hear those opportunities that you've shared with us. I know Enmedics has done extremely well in raising funds, so I'm really looking forward to them going out into the market. And so with some of the past experience that you had, what was it, because you've been involved in aging for a long time, wellness and aging for a long time, what was it that attracted you in the very beginning?
Well, my grandmother lived to be 95, and she studied health and alternative medicine for almost 40 years. So I would say, as the oldest and first granddaughter, I give a lot of credit to my grandmother. But I guess the impetus behind that was the fact that at 38, I was a type A that was in the finance world, and my body stopped working because I pushed myself beyond extreme. And all of a sudden, I was almost bedridden for several months. And so I immersed myself in mind, body medicine, wellness, everything possible, massage, acupuncture, aromatherapy. And that was kind of the impetus behind that. I also visited my first spa for a week called La Costa, and that was very, very exciting. And, that was a precipitous into being the founder of one of the first corporate wellness education companies and spa education companies. So anyway, it was more about healing myself and sharing what I'd learned along my journey. And it was curious to me that the women that were most attractive in our first retreat were all in finance. So little wonder.
That's very interesting. I love hearing that story. It's clear that women age 40 plus are actively looking for solutions and innovation. We're innovation savvy, and we're looking for opportunities to help do exactly what you have been looking at and investing in. So with Vector Point, what is happening with that as far as, are you doing any kind of focus on this sector with that partner?
Yes. So I'm the co-founder with Dawn McGrath at Vector and Rick Nagel, a co-founder at Vector Point Impact Partners. And this is our first fund. And we have been advising companies, but we're primarily focused on life science companies and consumer wellness, digital device, personalized medicine, and also climate tech. And yes, we are absolutely focused on this space. We're looking at using the UN sustainability goals, measuring ESG, but we're really focusing on those companies that are addressing big problems.
So when you look at an opportunity, either through Vector Point Impact Fund or yourself individually, what specifically do you look for that would cause you to want to write a check?
Well, exit time. Every founder of every company I've ever met thinks they're changing the world, and that's great, but they do need to have a good team, a large market. They need to have de-risked some of the investment. If it's a wellness company, life science company, I'm personally a believer in that some of the de-risking would be to have non-dilutive funding, i.e. from grants from foundations or from an SBIR, STTR grant, something that validates the science and, obviously have de-risk some of the investment and look at a timeline. And team is extremely important. Is there anyone on that team, or hopefully more than one, or advisors that have led a company to an exit before? I truly believe that it's all about team. And then, beyond that, do they have the benchmarks that shows what their exit pathway is? And are they really realistic about how much capital it will take for them to get to a successful exit, or whether it's an M&A or an IPO or a strategic acquisition?
So we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the call today. How long after you look at a company, I know you go into due diligence and get into the background of the company and cover all of the things that you've just mentioned. How long does it typically take to work through that process for the entrepreneurs that are here today that are looking for funding so that they can stage their growth and stage their presentation in such a way that it's inviting to us as investors?
So you're looking at from the time they initially present to deal screening to when they actually secure the investment?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, we used to say 6 months. I think it's been tightened up now to possibly, 3 months. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't people that hear you at deal screening, or that, really see the opportunity and have had some experience, or where it personally touches them. Or someone in their family or someone close to them that aren't saying, I'm willing to take a flyer on this based on the information. But I'd say for the entrepreneur, I would say plan on a good 6 months, and then be pleasantly surprised if it's 45 days to 90 days to, 3 months. It's about building a relationship of trust. But the more prepared you are with the infrastructure and having that firm foundation, from your pitch deck to your deal room, all your financials, your projections, having a good team of advisors. If you have that in place, you're much further down the pipeline.
So being well prepared is probably key in that instance. So what stage of companies are you guys looking at?
Well, we're looking at seed stage, all the way from seed stage to early stage, growth stage, probably in their second fund, or when we've, raised a lot more capital. But I think at this point in time, seed stage to early stage, we'd like to see them have some traction.
Well, I would like to thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to thank you. I know for all of you who are watching today, you have no idea what goes into the work that Jolene is doing. It seems like every time I talk to her, she's traveling to a conference to meet more investors, look at opportunities, and look at companies. So we want to thank you very much, Jolene, for being a part of this community and supporting us and helping us and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you very much, Connie.
Inspiring.
It's an honor.
Do you have any last comment that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I'd say there's nothing more important than health. Without your health, there's nothing. With health, there's everything. So let's vote with our dollars, and let's change the landscape of women's health. I'm quite passionate about making sure that our legacy for women's health is passed on. We have more options for our daughters and our granddaughters.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jolene. I really appreciate the time today, and I'm sure everyone in the audience does. And Jolene will be back with us. She'll be judging during the pitch competition as well. So thank you again, and thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Connie.
Our next speakers will discuss innovation, product development, and practical advice on how to overcome the unique challenges of developing FemAging tech products and services. Fard Janmar, founder and president of Inspectos, LLC, a globally respected digital innovation consultancy firm, and also co-founder of the FemAging Project, will lead today's discussion. He'll be joined by panelists Celeste Lee and Lori King. They're co-founders of Care Beauty. They've created an original, groundbreaking skincare company with products designed for mature skin. Debbie Dickinson, co-founder of ThermaBand, a wearable technology that cools or heats the skin, and FemAging's Fall 2021 Pitch Competition winner. And Alessandra Henderson, founder and CEO of Electra Health, a next-gen women's health platform on a mission to smash the menopause taboo. Electra empowers the 50 million women navigating menopause in the United States and the millions more abroad with evidence-based education, care, and community.
Welcome to our panel focusing on what does agile innovation look like in the FemTech era. I'm joined by some wonderful co-panelists today from a range of FemAging platforms. And what I'd like to do here is really focus in a bit on basics around your platform, your projects, your motivations for focusing on the segment of women over the age of 40. And it's really going to be a wonderful conversation over the next 15 minutes or so. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So what I'd like to do first is to just do a quick definition of what agile innovation really is about. And what it is, it's a innovation strategy that focuses on three things. It involves focusing on important customer and market needs. It's also about learning and iterating rapidly. And then finally, using those two areas of focus to deliver value to the customer and the end user in very clear ways. And so what I'd like to do is focus on best practices related to those topics from your perspective, as well as learn a little bit more about your product and service and your motivation for getting into this particular area of FemAging innovation. So just like to start out with the first question, just to have everybody here introduce themselves and talk a little bit about how your solution specifically meets the needs of women over the age of 40. So anybody can begin, and we'll just go from there.
I'm Celeste, and my partner Lori is next to me. We're with Care Beauty, and we got into FemAging a little bit by accident. Both of us were in the world of beauty and had worked across skincare, hair care, color, you name it, fragrance. And at a certain point in our own lives, in our late 40s, we discovered that our friends were all asking the same kinds of questions, which really, instead of we're like, what mascara should I wear? It was more like, what's going on with my under eye bags and sags? And we realized after recommending numerous concealers and cover-ups that there had to be a better way, and not only a better way, that there had to be a reason for why this is happening. And now I'm going to let Lori jump in.
Hi, I'm Lori King. After spending this much time in beauty across my career, I've seen many innovations. But one of the things that has been missing as we're aging is really looking at the improvement of the health of our skin and the base that our skin means to our body. And I think as we age, because the industry primarily ignores that, there aren't products that go after specific things that are happening with hormone decline, which we'll talk a lot about in a bit.
So let's go to Alessandra.
Sure. I'm Alessandra Henderson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Electra Health. At Electra Health, we're on a mission to smash the menopause taboo. And we do that by empowering women with our three core pillars. The first one is access to evidence-based education. The second one is access to virtual care and expertise. And then the third pillar is a supportive community. In terms of how we stitch that together under one digital platform, we are building what we like to think of as the companion app to support a woman over the course of her 10-year menopause journey. What we really find is that it does start with the question of just what is menopause or what is perimenopause too, when we started even earlier. And so really, I came to the women's health space through a personal health journey of my own, and specifically hormonal health. And I had absolutely no idea the importance of hormones on my entire well-woman being. A case in point, several years ago, actually in 2017, I froze my eggs, and the hormones from egg freezing impacted my eyesight. So I still, you know, depending on my cycle, at the risk of being too vulnerable right from the start, but, you know, my vision is impacted by my hormone levels. And so I had absolutely no idea that this could happen. And the more I started to pull a thread, the more I heard from countless women that, you know, no one was kind of helping to educate and empower them around the importance of hormonal health. So ultimately decided to take the plunge and really focus on an area, and especially a consumer or customer, as we call them, members, that has really been ignored and for decades, if not centuries. And we'll get into, you know, how we build our product, but exciting to be building solutions and starting to change the narrative for this important demographic.
And I'll jump in. I'm Debbie Dickinson, founder and CEO of ThermaBand. And, you know, our journey, I'm actually co-founded this business with my daughter, Markia, and really got into and recognizing the really